the last question. Okay. Now I would request the ability to ask some questions of Mr. Hefty. Mr. Hefty, the land on which these facilities would go is designated environmental protection and environmental protection subarea F, is that correct?
Yes.
And you've laid all this out in your staff recommendations to the Commission, correct?
Yes.
And that designation applies to these lands, meaning that they are considered the most environmentally significant, most susceptible to environmental degradation lands within the county, correct?
Yes.
And these are lands where degradation would adversely affect the supply of drinking water or environmental systems of regional, state, or national importance, correct?
I believe that's stated in the comp plan.
Okay. These lands are low-lying and very flood-prone, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The code and the comprehensive plan require that in order for these facilities to be approved, the applicant must have demonstrated that they are compatible with the objectives of the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, correct?
It's a comp plan question. I think what it says is that you can consider consistency with the comp plan.
Madam Chairperson, if I could, to Mr. Grosso, I think that if you have a comp plan question, that it would probably be Mr. Silva and perhaps even Mr. Warner, who is present today. So I would ask that you direct your comp plan questions to the to other staff members.
Very much respect, and just in the interest of time efficiency, if I ask a question and someone else is most appropriate, I have no objection for the staff to say, let this other person.
The attorney will.
Okay, thank you so much. Mr. Silva, the answer to that then is correct. I accurately stated a requirement of the comprehensive plan.
Could you repeat the question again, please?
That these facilities, in order to be approved, must be shown to be consistent with the objectives of the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan.
If we could, I'd like that question be asked by Mr. Warner, who is our most knowledgeable on the comprehensive plan.
Surely no objection.
Not that Mr. Silva is not knowledgeable, but I believe that Mr. Warner would be most knowledgeable.
Let's repeat that question.
Mr. Warner, it's one of
Mark Warner, RER.
It's one of the code and comp plan requirements that in order for this approval to be granted, it must have been demonstrated to be consistent with the objectives of Everglades restoration, correct?
All applications that are in an area where there is the SERP footprint or the SERP area, there are policies throughout the comprehensive plan through the conservation element, the coastal management element that says we must consider the impacts to SERP on applications in those areas, and they may be denied if they are found to be inconsistent.
And this is one that applies to
They may be denied.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think it's Mr. Hefty, the one most responsible for knowledgeable about SERP and Biscayne Bay restoration. I would like to go there next, if I can. And thank you, Mr. Warner. Mr. Hefty, you're familiar with the Biscayne Bay restoration project that's part of SERP?
Yes.
The reason that that project is being done is because Biscayne Bay, as a result of roads and development and other impacts, has lost so much fresh water that it is now endangered, correct?
Yeah, it's correct. The goal of SERP is to put additional fresh water into nearshore areas of Biscayne Bay.
And so goal one of the Biscayne Bay project is to put more fresh water back into the bay than we're currently getting, correct?
Additional fresh water, but also to modify the way that fresh water is delivered so it's beneficial and not injurious to the environment.
Okay. And objective 2 of the restoration plan is to restore the surrounding wetlands that border Biscayne Bay, correct?
That's a component of it as well.
Okay. Now, one of the problems that has occurred that's important to this county is that salt water, as a result of that degradation, has begun to intrude into county and municipal aquifers, drinking water well fields, correct?
Saltwater, certainly there is saltwater intrusion, whether it's as a result of degradation or water management features. Several things affect salt intrusion.
There's always scientific uncertainty about such things, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And one of the reasons that the prior 2007 approval prohibited these radial collector wells is that your staff had significant concern that those wells could worsen the current saltwater intrusion problems, correct?
They weren't a component of the 2007.
They weren't allowed.
There was no specific application for the radial collector wells at that time. Early on in the development of the project, the water sources were not fully developed, or at least were not part of the application. And so, what we chose to do in our recommendation is to recommend that no withdrawals from the Biscayne Aquifer be made as part of this project at that time.
And the basis for that recommendation was a serious ecological concern your staff had that radial collector wells in this site could seriously worsen the existing saltwater intrusion problem.
Madam Chairperson, I believe that's been asked and answered. He explained that it was not part of the application at the time. So let's move on to the next question.
This facility would use 90 million gallons a day, approximately?
Well, I think what's proposed is 90 million gallons a day of reuse water from the county's South District wastewater plant and 124 million gallons a day of water through the radial collector well system.
And under the proposed approval today being recommended, the county FPL could use these radial collector wells instead of the 90 million gallons a day of county reuse water, correct?
I think what's applied is for these to be the backup source of water when the other water is not available.
Okay. 90 million gallons a day. Will you give the commission some sense of how that compares to the amount of water that some of the cities in this county pull out of the ground on a daily basis? How much water is that?
It's a considerable amount of water, but I don't have any data to demonstrate what the other cities are pulling. We have folks here from WASA if you're interested in specific water withdrawals.
This probably, do you know whether or not this exceeds the amount of water that entire cities use and withdraw on a daily basis?
I don't know.
Is there someone from WASA who could give us that information here
I think they're
in the room, if that's appropriate? Just trying to be efficient with time. I'm going to keep asking questions, if I may, until the gentleman. Well, here he is. Okay.
Madam Chair, Doug Yoder with the Water and Sewer Department. Just as a point of reference, the Water and Sewer Department provides about 300 million gallons a day of water to our customers.
Can you tell us are there not cities that use water less than 9 million gallons a day in this county?
There are some cities that don't buy their water from us, that have their own water supply. None that would be as much as 90 million gallons a day, however.
Thank you.
Mr. Silva or Hefty, whoever feels most comfortable answering the question, the code and the comprehensive plan have a policy that you've laid out in your recommendations that requires the county to take all steps necessary to assure the current operation and future capability to expand its public drinking water well fields. Is that right?
I believe so. Correct.
Right. There are 7 potable water well fields within 10 miles of the facility, the FPL facility, correct?
Yes.
Yes. And there are 12 potable water well fields within 15 miles of the proposed radial collector wells, right?
Not sure offhand.
Okay. I'm quoting off of page 6 of Mr. Hefty, your memorandum. Does that sound about right?
Probably, yeah.
Okay. One of those well fields, Mr. Hefty, is the sole source of drinking water for all of Monroe County, people in the Keys. Is that right?
It is a drinking water well. I think over the years they're looking at other sources of water farther down in the Keys, but yes, it is the Florida Keys Aqueduct Authority water well.
Okay. There's no actual source of fresh potable water in the Keys. That's why they got to get it from here on the mainland.
That's correct.
Throughout, as part of this process, there's also a larger state approval process for this under the Siting Act to approve the FPL expansion facilities. Is that right?
Yes.
And your staff has played a role over the last, 5 or 6 years in that process, correct?
Yes.
And your staff has submitted a number of 6 or 7 comment letters to the state of Florida based on your technical expertise and your scientific recommendations, correct?
The county has submitted them, yes.
Yes. And I'd ask Ms. Fain if she could put into the record, we have the 6 county comment letters that are submitted to the state, and we would ask to put those into the record, Madam Chair. While Ms. Fain is doing that, if I can continue. During that process, your staff has commented to the state in each of its letters on the advisability of these radial collector wells, correct?
Very likely, yes.
And I'd like to summarize the sum total of your comments to the state. Your staff has said to the state, these proposed radial collector wells could have a very significant adverse impact on Biscayne Bay, correct?
Probably, yeah.
And you have said that the amount of information that FPL has provided to you does not allow you to conclude otherwise, correct?
In those letters, I'm sure that's how we summarized it, yes.
And you said in those letters that the lack of information from Florida Power and Light precludes your ability to determine that FPL has demonstrated consistency with your code and comprehensive plan as it relates to this issue, correct?
It's been some time since I've looked at all of our letters, but that sounds consistent with what we've said over the years.
And some of the issues that you raised in those letters were the following. The radial collector wells could wind up sucking fresh water out of the aquifer and not just taking salt water out of the bay, correct?
That's one of the concerns.
And you've raised the concern that the operation of these wells could significantly worsen the saltwater intrusion problem that can threaten potable drinking water well fields, correct?
I think we have raised the concern on its potential impact of salt intrusion.
And you have raised the concern that there's these cooling canals there at the site, that these radial collector wells could actually interact and suck water out of those cooling wells, correct?
Correct.
You've raised the issue that there's a plume of water coming out of the facility into the bay that these wells could interact with and suck that plume water up, correct?
I think what we said was that the water from the radial collector wells is sinking down into the groundwater, and these wells could potentially interact with that water and draw it up into the wells.
And you've said that if that happens, that would be a significant adverse, bad environmental impact in this region, correct?
I don't know that we've summarized it that way.
Okay. But that,
the interaction with the cooling canal plume.
Okay. But you weren't raising that as an issue that that'd be good if it happened, right?
We raised it as an issue of concern.
Okay. Now, since you wrote those letters, there has been no additional information regarding these issues provided to you by Florida Power and Light, correct?
I can't say that's true now.
Okay.
I think over time, you have to keep in mind, we've been working on this project for a number of years. And certainly there were letters that we sent early on. We've had many meetings with Florida Power and Light and with other resource agencies trying to work together as a team to understand the potential impacts of the project. And I believe that over time, FPL has made changes to their modeling effort and tried to provide additional data to satisfy the agency's concerns.
Is that what you told the state in your last comment letter to them under the Siting Act?
That
isn't it? Didn't you tell the state in your last comment letter under the Siting Act that the hydrologic studies and the further information you had been requesting from Florida Power and Light still had not been given to you?
I think what we may have told the state is that when the zoning approval was granted back in 2007, there was a requirement for FPL to provide modeling that was satisfactory to the county. And I think what's happened since that period of time is FPL has provided modeling effort that the other agencies have found acceptable, but that the county's own modeling folks have not felt completely confident, fully explains the picture, and so that with respect to whether or not they've satisfied the county completely with modeling effort, I think that's the point we were trying to make in our comments to the state.
And that is the situation that exists today as you and I are speaking, correct?
Is that in terms of the modeling effort, the county's technical staff feel that the modeling effort was leaves some uncertainty.
And so as of today, as you and I are speaking to the commission this morning, you cannot tell them that the technical information provided by FPL demonstrates consistency with the environmental criteria in your code and comprehensive plan, correct?
I think what I would say is that the information that we have received up to this point does not prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that there would be no impact. And so in an abundance of caution and based upon the actions of the Water Management District, which is they're a modeling powerhouse. They have a lot more modelers than we do here at the county. We're sort of taking their lead approach and moving forward cautiously and recommending that FPL, as they move forward, conduct monitoring to make sure that they don't have adverse environmental impacts.
We have existing saltwater intrusion problems in this area of the county already, right?
We have salt intrusion down there already.
We've known that for how many, 20 years, roughly?
Sure, long time.
We haven't been able to fix them yet, have we?
No, those things don't get fixed over the short term. You need a lot of water management activities in order to put more fresh water in the landscape.
The current state of the art of engineering, of fixing a saltwater intrusion problem is not very good, is it?
I don't know if the question is a matter of water. The way you counteract salt intrusion is by having enough fresh water in the landscape in order to counteract salt intrusion. So it's not just the engineering question. It's, is there enough fresh water in that part of the system?
If we approve of the condition as your staff is recommending today, the saltwater intrusion problem from these wells will have occurred before we know about it, correct?
I don't know that that's necessarily true. I mean, when you look at the modeling that was provided by FPL, they're predicting a very small amount of water coming from sources to the west, and a larger amount of it coming from Biscayne Bay. And so our recommendation is based upon them demonstrating that through monitoring as they go to construct and initially operate the wells.
But they haven't demonstrated that to you yet.
Well, again, a model is only as good as its construct. It's a predictive tool that sometimes isn't always accurate, and so in an abundance of caution, our recommendation is to have them prove as they go forward that their modeling was correct and that there aren't adverse impacts.
There's no plan attached to your recommendation where they've said, if there's a problem, this is exactly what the fix will be, right?
What we've asked is a condition that says if it's determined that the project is causing adverse impacts, that they have to abate that. And through any number of means. It could be that they stop pumping, or that they change the way they pump, or that they get additional fresh waters. I mean, those are solutions that could be determined if a problem is discovered.
But none of those are part of a plan that attaches to this approval, right?
The requirement for a corrective action is part of our recommendation.
But there's no specific recommendation. There's no specific plan of action that's part of the recommendation that they are absolutely required to do, correct?
Well, there's no plan because there's no specific impact that's been identified. There's potential for an impact, and so based upon that, if you discover an impact, then you develop a plan to counteract that as you discover what the impact is, if there is one.
There's no certainty, as we speak, that that impact will be able to be fixed, is there?
That's been asked and answered about 3 times now. So
Okay. With that, I'm going to step aside and allow Ms. Fain to ask some questions, Madam Chair.